People want you to get it together as soon as possible because they don't want to have to worry about you. Your sadness, your depression feels like a burden because others are worried about if you're going to be okay. And when I say that's not really your problem, it's because you're still focusing on something outside of yourself. Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jay. I'm a bit of a transition queen. I've actually dealt with a lot of transition in my life, and I decided to create this video for those who are dealing with life transitions and wondering how they can get through them a bit smoother, if you will. I definitely want us to have a 2025 that is less about survival and more about thriving. But I would say more than that it's a more healed year. We've definitely committed to doing our inner work, and now we are responding to life rather than reacting. So if you haven't checked out the other videos where I talk going from chaos to calm, definitely check those out. So today we're going to talk about depression. We're going to talk about your depression and how it may be burdening others, and most importantly, how that is none of your business. I wanted to create this video, and I don't want it to be so heavy because obviously if you've dealt or you're dealing with depression, it's already heavy enough as it is. I wanted to actually bring a face to it. I wanted to create it because it's something that I wish I had when I was going through my own depression. To see someone that kind of had gone through what I've gone through and that there was another side to it. Because when you're in it, it's so hard to see the other side. So many people here on YouTube are so inspirational. And because they were so inspirational to me, I wanted to create something so that I can help others see past their circumstances. Something I wish I knew that a lot of people around me didn't know is I wish that I had addressed these feelings and had more of understanding about what was really going on with me. So number one, transitions and depression. So depression can often be triggered by major life changes in your life. What they don't mention a lot is that you're not only going to be triggered by major life changes, you're also going to trigger other people. In my experience and with my culture, we really didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about therapy. Now there are a lot more resources. There's a lot more women, in particular Black and brown women, that are talking about depression and mental health. But even though we have all of these amazing women talking about it, and though there's all these amazing resources, it's still not in the fabric of our cultures in a sense. So I'm Latina and I'm an immigrant. And when I finally got the courage to start sharing that with others around me, I didn't realize that I was going to trigger them. They couldn't handle the depth of my depression. They didn't know how to help me. And people just don't know enough already. And even if they are aware, they still don't know how to respond or react to what's going on. If you've lived your life looking, quote unquote, like you've got it together, you look put together, so people aren't really gonna connect the two. Depression doesn't look like what a lot of people think or assume it looks like. So a lot of people tend to feel helpless. They feel like they can't help you. And a lot of people also feel like they gotta solve the problem for you. Latinas have the highest rate of depression, and it's understandable to me because being an immigrant, and even if you're first gen, it's passed along through generation, especially it's been my experience. Well, my mother went through worse, she couldn't speak Spanish, and my grandmother back home, she went through worse. We always have this idea that our ancestors or even the generation before me was able to put up with a lot more, then why, with all our privilege and living here, why can't we seem to get it together? At least for me, that was a lot of what I was feeling. And mostly, it wasn't that people were telling me this, it's because I had put that pressure on myself. And I feel like a lot of us put this pressure on ourselves that because we're in this new generation, because we're in this country, that we should be able to figure out and get it together. So a bit of a story time. If you've been following me, you know that I had identity loss. I didn't know who I was. I felt like I had no purpose, no meaning in the world. And what I learned is that all of these things actually means that you're going through a life transition. Losing your sense of purpose and your sense of being dependent on, especially if you're a mom and your children go off to college. And if all you had to identify you is being someone's parent, then when that is no longer available, say it's your career, the money that you have, the looks that you have, When that title is no longer around, you find it very difficult to find your center, and you lose who you think you are, especially if that thing has been what it meant to others. Depression is more than just sadness. There's so much misunderstanding about the idea of what it is. It's just like, oh, you're just really, really sad. But it's more than that. You actually feel it in your body. It's like this weight that you can't seem to take off. And so there's just this understanding that if you just got happy, that everything would be fine. And what people don't understand, that it's more than that. It's not just a feeling of sadness, but it's like, I would describe it, it feels like you're in a pit, in a hole. For me, there was this vision that used to come over me that I was in quicksand. And I just couldn't get out of it, as much as I tried to get happy, as much as I tried to learn about what was going on with me. When I talk about misunderstanding, my family and friends were not equipped to help me. And because they were being triggered about their own stuff and maybe their own experience with depression unknowingly, it started to feel like you were a burden. People want you to get it together as soon as possible because they don't want to have to worry about you. Your sadness, your depression feels like a burden because others are worried about if you're going to be okay. And when I say that's not really your problem, it's because you're still focusing on something outside of yourself. You're still wanting to get it together, quote unquote, get it together for other people rather than yourself. To really start taking a look at yourself, number one, why you had this breakdown in the first place and why it led to a depression. It's so important that you get the right help. What helped me was actually listening to a podcast. There's an amazing podcast. It's called, I believe, Therapy for Black Girls. It just so happened that they were talking about depression. And when she started going down the list about some of the depression symptoms, I had about 90% of what she was talking about. I remember being in the car like, wow, am I depressed? I had educated myself on what was going on. I knew that I was going through a life transition. Just like everyone else, I thought I was just really sad. So what I decided to do was go and see a therapist. I remember someone saying that depression was like a spiritual disease. And someone else, I think it was Jim Carrey, he talked about how depression is deep rest. After seeing my therapist, I started understanding what started triggering everything was because I had a lot of childhood trauma that I had never dealt with. I was what they call a functioning depressant for years. And when my daughter left for college, there was nothing to distract me. I lost my job. I remember doing temp work and almost blacking out because I was so depressed and so burnt out and didn't understand that I was really going through something that I needed to face and heal. I needed to do a lot of inner work. And I needed to see a therapist to help me do that. I couldn't do that by myself. There is such a big impact that our identity and who we believe we are has on us. As I mentioned, being a single mom and stuck to that title, the title of provider and the title of always has it together and always feeling like you need to be on point, took such a toll on me. When I was going through my depression, I felt like I just wasn't a good mom. And for someone that was so stuck to that title, I felt so much guilt and shame, and I didn't feel like I was being a good enough mom. When I went through my injury and I wasn't this able-bodied person, that took a lot of toll on me and who I thought I was and who I was telling myself I was. Me having to depend on other people and feeling like a physical burden to them was something else that made that feeling of being a burden to people even worse. Like I mentioned, others may not understand how crippling it is to be in that depression. I remember I was living in LA at the time and they have the tar pits, and I remember I would pass through there and that's exactly the feeling that I felt. I wanted so bad to be out of this, but every time something just kept on pulling. The more I fought, the worse it got. And that's because I needed deep rest and I needed to let go of the beliefs of who I was. I needed all of that to break away. I needed to stop fighting. I needed to face the things that I had been holding on for such a long time. And because in that time I couldn't hold that job down because of my depression, I actually got given the gift and, in a sense, being forced to face myself. So when I went home, I just started journaling. I remember waking up every day and just writing everything that was coming out of me. It was like I was this pressurized bottle that just needed to open up, burst open, and let out everything that I had been holding on to since I was a child. So I remember having this journal on my nightstand, and those journals turned into a box load full of journals of everything that had ever been inside of me that I had not talked about, I had not faced, I had not processed. And the funny thing about that is that I learned that when you're going through a depression, it actually causes memory loss. You can't focus, you can't concentrate. And it's been scientifically proven that if you journal, journaling actually helps lessen the symptoms of depression and helps to regain your memory. So intuitively, I was being guided to do this thing that was going to help me heal and help me work through my depression. I also remember going to my therapist and having almost breakthroughs in my life, several a week. My therapist saying, well, no wonder you're dealing with so much. People don't have as many breakthroughs in a year that you have in a week. And having her validate me, because I wasn't getting the validation from my friends, from my family, from my community. It's not to blame them, because people are not equipped or licensed to help you. But having her validate everything that I was feeling and that I was going through was actually helping me heal. If any of this is resonating with you, I want you to know what helped me at a real difficult point in my depression. I was literally on the ground in the fetal position, and I just remember it had gotten so heavy. It just felt like such a weight. I honestly didn't know how I would make it to the next day. And I remember being on the floor and praying, like, God, please take this feeling away from me. I can't take this any further. And just like that, I remember the pain, the anguish, everything went away. It was like someone had lifted like this huge ton of weight on top of me. And I remember looking around, and when I was getting up, a little voice came to me, and it was like, this is temporary. Meaning that I needed to figure out what was going on with me. And what helped me is to start educating myself on what was going on. I started reading and understanding that I was going through a life transition. I had a podcast that helped me understand that I was having symptoms of depression. I went to therapy so that someone can help walk me through what I was experiencing. So someone can validate that all of these things are real, that it's not just sadness. And I was skilled and licensed to help me walk out of it. I also started creating a community outside of the people I knew. There is group therapy that you can go to, and you can also join many community groups around your city. And honestly, it just felt really nice sometimes to be around people that understood depression, but it also felt good to go to different community groups where people didn't know that you were someone that had depression, that you didn't feel labeled as a person with depression, that people saw you as more than that, and even a healed version of you. So I hope you understand that there's no shame in it, there's no guilt. And if you find yourself that people aren't understanding, you have to make sure that you keep searching for those people that will help you validate that experience. And it's okay if family members don't understand, your friends may not understand. It is not your job to convince them. It's your job to focus on you and get yourself the help that you need, because ultimately that's what's going to help you heal. And there is no shame in taking medication. And please understand that whatever works for you, works for you. I want to leave you with some journal questions. I'm going to be looking at my notes that are over here to my left. So number one, what are some triggers that you have identified in your own experience with depression? How has your identity been affected by depression? Number three, in what ways do you feel misunderstood by others in regards to your depression? And number four, what steps have you taken or can you take to seek the right help? If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching.